I am Grady Culhane, the CapeCod.com News Center, and welcome to Sunday Journal for a special New Year's themed episode. We're talking with Barnstable County Commissioner and Yarmouth Select Board member Mark Forrest, who's going to be talking a little bit more about how this year was for the Cape and Islands in general. Thank you very much for joining us, Mark. We have a new administration coming back in. Donald Trump is coming back for his second term in office, so we also wanted to discuss how things might be impacted here on Cape Cod with the bridges and offshore wind. But yeah, how has the year been for Barnstable County? Do you have some highs and lows that you wanted to share with us? How have things been for this year?
Grady, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And in terms of looking back a little bit, in terms of some of our successes for the county, we've had a very, very busy year. I would say it's a very productive year in Barnstable County with the commissioners. We hired a new administrator, Michael Dutton, very professional, very talented, and we're very excited about him coming on board. He's getting up to speed real quickly. There's been a lot of time and effort put into strengthening the county's finances. We received a boost in our bond rating and a very glowing report from Standard & Poor concerning our financial management, so we're very proud of that. We just received some recent news that we've got an agreement on a master plan initiative for Joint Base Cape Cod. We've been working with the military and the Cape Cod Commission staff and Mass Development to see if we can come up with an agreement on how to update the master plan for the base so that it can continue to play an important role in terms of training and national security, but also play an important role in terms of some of our environmental initiatives, looking into the future and working with the military and with the town. So that's exciting. So we've got some progress there. That should get launched very shortly, and we anticipate that getting well underway in 2025. I think another big highlight looking back is we were able to convince the governor to abandon this machine gun range proposal on the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve. The commissioners have been incredibly aggressive in pushing for a suspension of that project or a termination of the project. And back in October, Governor Healy basically informed us that she agreed with our arguments and put that project on the back burner. So we've got that out of the way. We can now focus on the future out at Joint Base Cape Cod, working with the military and Mass Development, and the Cape Cod Commission staff. So we're very excited about that. So those are just some of the successes. But I think perhaps the biggest one that I think I'm most proud of, and I think the other commissioners are as well, relates to our ability to spend and invest this $42 million worth of ARPA funding, federal funding that was made available to us by the Congress and the Biden administration, and to make some strategic investments on this funding. The biggest area of impact, I think, is in housing. We set aside of the $42 million, roughly $11 million, and we've put money into a whole host of projects. And one of the things that we're able to do is help finance a number of new housing developments. One of the biggest things we need is affordable housing inventory. We just need more and more units because they're becoming scarcer and scarcer. And so I think if you added up all the projects that we funded, it's well over 320 units of new affordable housing that we're going to be able to help create on Cape Cod.
Wow, interesting. I believe it was Wellfleet has recently been performing a quick review, a study of like how many are in need for housing down there with the Maurice's campgrounds rebuild and stuff like that. And also, I think recently you guys just issued some money for specifically Truro. So it seems like the Outer Cape is definitely going to be getting a big dent taking care of that affordable housing issue soon.
The affordable housing need on the Outer Cape is perhaps the most critical. That's not we have a problem in virtually every Cape Cod town, but the Outer Cape it's become incredibly intense. It's very, very difficult for anybody to find a place to stay out there. So a lot more work is going on. I have to commend a lot of the selectmen and local officials. They've certainly embraced this priority. Our Cape legislative delegation has worked incredibly hard. The governor has basically set aside over $4 billion under the Affordable Housing Act. And I think one of the things that we want to do in Barnstable County is make sure that we're taking advantage of every opportunity under that act to help create more affordable housing opportunities for Cape Cod residents.
Now, missing from the that particular act was a local option real estate transfer fee that I believe Nantucket was. Brooke Moore, the select chair over there, was on recently, kind of talking about how excited they were for that and disappointed that it wasn't there. Cape Cod State Senator Julian Sear said that he'd like to come back for that with an amendment. Is that something else that you're hoping to see in this upcoming session?
Yeah, I think you will see another legislative push for that, and I know the Cape delegation and others have been pushing to have something with a fairly broad appeal and an option for communities throughout the Cape and Islands. But whether or not it's that or an adoption of a transfer tax for the islands, we're hoping that some progress can be made, in this coming legislative session. We know it's a priority for our legislators. I talked to Senator Sear about this the other day. I know it's high on his radar screen.
All right, that's awesome. Good to hear. Now, as well, we have a few big successes related to the Cape Cod Canal bridges. We had some money that was secured for the Sagamore Bridge that happened this year, though it feels like a lifetime. And we've also managed to put $350 million directly now is with Mass DOT to start preparatory work for that, moved from federal agencies to the state. I imagine that's a big success for you guys. Are you looking forward to hopefully the rest of it getting funded for the Bourne Bridge in 2025? You think that's reasonable?
Well, I think we're going to certainly work on it. The question's going to be, will there be funding available to undertake that work? I think that's the question at the moment. And you're right. Getting the funding, the $2.1 billion for the Sagamore Bridge replacement is a significant achievement. I have to give a lot of credit to Governor Healy for her leadership and getting the Mass Department of Transportation focused on getting the planning and design work underway. That had been stalled in the prior administration, but with her efforts, that work has gone well underway. And because of the aggressive planning and design work, they worked incredibly fast at getting this work underway. We were able to compete successfully for a significant amount of federal money. I mean, we're talking about $2.1 billion that's been allocated to this project, and the states put money on the table as well. You're going to see the pace of that pick up shortly, and now the focus is on the Bourne Bridge. What do we do about that project? That's a little bit more money. We're talking about almost $2.5 billion. The state is now getting geared up to submit another set of grant applications to the federal government for the next round of funding for that project. And again, it's another project that the state will be making a contribution on. The last time there was an application several months ago, those were not successful. So what we've learned is that you just keep trying and keep working at it. Now, the big question is going to be with the Trump administration, is infrastructure going to continue to be a priority for this administration? And how will Massachusetts be able to compete and succeed in a project like this with the next administration? Historically, infrastructure spending has been basically, a bipartisan or nonpartisan type of expenditure. So I think a lot of people are concerned that maybe Massachusetts might be at a disadvantage. I know Senator Warren, Senator Markey, Congressman Keating have done a great job in advocating for us and in helping secure federal support. My sense is that's not going to change at all. What will change is, the priorities of the incoming administration. So I think you'll see applications. I think you'll see an effort, to secure federal funding. I'd like to think that with the state's share of funding, we can at least begin some of the design work, planning and design work and permitting work on that bridge, so that it's not like we should wait an extended period of time. I think we're going to definitely need the construction funds for that project, long after the Trump administration leaves office and a new administration comes in. But my hope is that we can, at least with state funding, get some of the planning and design work underway over there.
Yeah, it's interesting with these bigger infrastructure projects where like they have to basically be robust enough because they're going to last through like 3 presidencies potentially, just because of how long it takes for design and construction. So a lot of coordination, I'm sure, is still in the works.
Well, it speaks to the importance of having a state administration that's committed to a project like this, because your point's well taken. If there are changes at the federal level, you need continuity somewhere, and the continuity in this case would be with the Healy administration. So they've done a great job. They keep carrying this on, and hopefully, this administration will move forward on the design work and planning work for the other bridge. When you add them all up together, it's a multi-year initiative. So, I don't see, regardless of who's in office, we're not looking at the Bourne Bridge project beginning until probably, a few years after the Trump administration is gone from office.
Now, I also wanted to ask about like how you feel the wind sector's been doing as of late. But before we move on, I just wanted to quickly touch on Governor Healy. Do you think that she's been a very receptive governor for Cape and Islands specific issues, things like with the highlight on the transportation and more involved with like affordable housing and stuff like that? You think there's been more progress under her?
We have regular discussions with her staff, her office, and we meet. I'm a member of the Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Association. I'm on the board of directors. I'm the vice president of the group. And we meet with key officials from the Healy administration on a regular basis. I would say Governor Healy's been incredibly attentive to the needs and issues here on Cape Cod. I know there may be some areas where some people might have some disagreements, but I think by and large, she has been very open to hearing the concerns of local officials and local residents, and I can go down the whole laundry list of things that they've delivered on. I've talked about the base, right? They've delivered on that. They've delivered on the environment in terms of getting funding here to do a number of environmental projects. I'm very involved in ecological restoration, salt marsh restoration, and they've been incredibly supportive of our efforts there. This administration has an agency called the Division of Ecological Restoration, and they partner with almost all of our communities on the Cape to do salt marsh restoration, ecological restoration projects. There's virtually something going on in every town. So they've been great to work with there. And obviously, there's been a lot of speculation with the new administration what might be happening with wind energy. And I think candidate Trump was very clear that as soon as he takes office, day one, he said he's going to issue an executive order, basically, on wind energy, and that certainly will have an impact on the offshore wind sector. So, any projects that aren't fully permitted or any projects that don't have a lease, I think those projects, are certainly going to be in trouble.
Yeah, it seems like it's been, unfortunately, a few steps forward, a few steps back for wind on Cape Cod as of late. We also recently had Question 7, which is a special ballot question for the Outer Cape specifically. That was proposed by John Leonard, a Hingham resident, and that referendum was asking, basically it was a policy question of like supporting offshore wind further. It failed by about 1,400 votes. It was close in a lot of the towns. Provincetown was pro, but it was much closer to 50-50 everywhere else, or alternatively just against in places like Harwich, Chatham. Also leading up to the election, there was a leases that were out for bid north of Cape Cod, and only half of them sold, and they were for the minimum bid from the most recent state round, which kind of seems to indicate sort of a concern with maybe the administration changing over. What have you been seeing? What have you been hearing as we're trying to push towards this greener energy future?
Well, as we look ahead, offshore wind energy has an enormous potential and an enormous opportunity, both in terms of dealing with climate change and also in terms of creating jobs and economic opportunity. A lot of the job creation, a lot of the economic opportunity has been largely focused in urban ports, urban areas like Fall River and New Bedford, the Salem area. I think a lot of people are still anxious to see more of those benefits come to Cape Cod. But I think that what has sort of tempered the enthusiasm for offshore wind has been these transmission landings, where a number of these projects have been very, very controversial. Years ago, the federal government actually looked at doing more coordination for offshore wind transmission, sort of somehow consolidating and having sort of a transmission superhighway where these wind farms could plug in and take that energy to where the load is. I know when the Biden administration came into office, they really revived those initiatives and those studies. But now with them leaving office, it's not clear whether or not any of that is going to come to fruition, particularly if this new administration puts basically, an end to the offshore wind energy market. Again, I shouldn't say they'll end it. I think what they'll happen is there'll be some bumps in the road for the time that they're in office. But my sense is that in Massachusetts, the governor, the administration, they're going to do whatever they can to help keep the industry, going and moving forward. But it's going to be difficult to do that if Donald Trump issues an executive order that basically ends the tax credits or limits the ability of federal funds to be used for these projects, puts in place people that staff these agencies that are not going to be cheerleading for offshore wind. And there are a host of other ways in which they can make things challenging for the industry. But I think the reason why it's been divisive on the Cape, I think largely is concern about fishing impacts and environmental impacts, as well as concern about some of the controversies over transmission landings and people sort of following those developments and are concerned about the impacts and what they might mean.
I also, so in your opinion right now, it's really just wind is not lucrative without the tax, essentially. That's pretty much the only thing that's going to help keep this afloat. Doesn't seem there's enough demand there on its own right now for it to be like a self-sustaining or in the economy that we have now.
All the people that and the bankers that I have talked to over the years that have been involved in investing and putting together financial packages for these projects, they've all talked about the importance of the tax credits, the federal tax credits, these production tax credits, in terms of making the financing work. I don't think there's really anything that the state can do that can provide the kind of impact that these tax credits are providing. And I think it will send a very chilling signal to those that are investing in this area. I know here in the United States, there's certainly a lot of interest in it, but still the tax credits are critical, and often the financing comes from around the planet, around the globe. I mean, the European banks have been heavily involved in the investment side of it, and you're seeing many of the companies that are doing business here are largely foreign.
Yeah, indeed. Now, as well, you actually mentioned the jobs, and that's been something that we at the CapeCod.com NewsCenter have kind of been interested in a while now. We're hopefully going to be doing a follow-up to this conversation, too. But it seems that the job creation hasn't been largely on Cape. There's been some at the Mass Maritime Academy and Four Seas Cape Cod Community College had discussed potential opportunities when they have expanded some green jobs in general, but it wasn't necessarily like a new course for turbine maintenance or like local power station maintenance and things like that. With the way things are right now, where it's just sort of landing the cables and the power is just going to get sent to hubs off Cape, do you feel like there maybe hasn't been as much job growth for Cape Codders as you'd like to see?
Well, I think there's job growth. The question is, where is the growth? And in some cases, if there are the opportunities for Cape Codders to get training and expertise in some of these areas, then they'll at least be in a position where they can compete for jobs in other areas where they are. I know a lot of people on the Cape that work in some very interesting fields, but they have to commute, and it's one of the reasons why it's important to make sure that those bridges get
we're going back to the bridges,
right? Yeah.
It's true. The Bourne Bridge especially, I believe, had like months of maintenance where they'd have to shut it down, I believe both ways, potentially, if they don't get the funding soon to just plan for a full refit. That would be devastating for the local economy, according to Paul Nitzwicki, Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce CEO, who said it'd leave an economic scar lasting potentially generations. So that's kind of where we're at on that front with the Bourne Bridge.
Well, we don't want to see anything catastrophic, but that's not what's going to happen. What'll happen is there'll be load limits I mean, that's the thing that would happen in a likely scenario, and we don't want to see that, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, considering all the shipping and stuff for our food is pretty much exclusively bridges as well too for grocery stores, and then
the vehicular traffic over those bridges for food and supplies and a whole range of including people, economically losing access even to one of the bridges would be devastating. No question.
So as we're looking down the barrel of 2025, and it's just been a snap of the fingers for me. I don't know about you, but do you have any kind of major topics of interest? Like either a New Year's resolution essentially for Barnstable County, or just in general some of the major topics you're hoping to target specifically?
I think
next
we'll
year?
be taking up New Year's resolutions at our next meeting. I think a lot of our focus going ahead is going to be still sort of focusing on pocketbook issues, finding ways to see what more we can do on the housing side. We've had a housing strategy that's been prepared through the Cape Cod Commission. We'll be looking at what more we can do collectively to improve affordable housing. We'll also be taking a hard look at the administration's budget. I'd say by February we should have the opportunity to see the incoming administration's first budget. We'll be making an assessment in terms of how it will impact Cape Cod, whether there's budgeting that's in place to keep investments in infrastructure like bridges, like big bridge projects, if those investments are going to continue or if those investments are going to be cut. There's a lot of talk about tax cuts, and certainly we'll be looking at how that might affect spending for particularly the environment, and because you got to pay for the tax cuts. So where's that money going to come from? So hopefully some of the programs that we've been really dependent on, related to the environment, and as everyone knows, Medicare, Medicaid spending is incredibly important here on Cape Cod. Our hospitals and healthcare industry really depends on it. They've been talking about big cuts there. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. And also tariffs. I think we need to, with all the talk of tariffs, we need to keep our eye on tariff impacts. I think one area that we've heard some concern about is continued tariffs from involving Canada and lumber. If we're concerned about affordable housing, lumber is a huge component in terms of taxes. We also, and tariffs. So if tariffs are imposed on Canadian goods, further tariffs on lumber coming from Canada, because we get a lot of lumber from the Canadians, that's something to be concerned about. It adds to the cost of housing, and we should be trying to bring those costs down, particularly when it comes to building supplies. Also, tariffs on Canada. Think about hydropower. This region is becoming increasingly dependent on fairly low-cost renewable energy from the Canadians, and hydropower, if that gets taxed or is subject to tariffs or retaliation, some of the members of the Canadian government are talking about retaliating if there's some tariffs here on our side of the border. They're talking about retaliating when it comes to the cost of energy. So the fairly inexpensive renewable energy that we get from Canada could become much more expensive in the coming months. And the last thing that we need right now are seeing, housing bills go up, energy bills go up, further constraints on healthcare if Medicare gets cut significantly. So I think in the early part of 2025, we'll be taking a hard look at the changes in Washington and to what degree they'll be having an impact on the quality of life on Cape Cod, and we'll be wanting to talk to our legislators and others about what we can do to address that and perhaps see if we can mitigate or stop some of anything negative coming this way.
Are some of these magnified a bit more because of the fact that so much of Cape Cod's actually on fixed income, being retirees and whatnot?
I'm glad you brought that up. There's this sort of illusion in places like Washington on Beacon Hill that, the Cape Cod is a land of the rich. But the reality is we have a substantial part of our community that's on fixed income. Seniors living just on Social Security. We have a high percentage of people dependent on Social Security as their major source of income. And so even minor costs increases, cost of living can be devastating. I was mentioning earlier today to another group, we're seeing increases in homeowners insurance going up, particularly because of all the storms and all the damage that we've seen in other parts of the country. The industry's looking at recovering as much of those losses or those expenditures as they can. So we're seeing rates go up, and we've got to keep an eye on what those rates might be for 2025 and what we can do to keep those down as best we can. So, I'm just fearful that 2025 could be an expensive year for a lot of people, and we need to really be focused on what we can do to keep the cost of living, these increases, to fight on behalf of our Cape residents to make sure that these cost increases are manageable and not as excessive as we're hearing they might be.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mark, I'm afraid we're about coming up on time, but thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to highlight about big successes for this year or things you're looking forward to for the next while we still have you?
No, we've covered a lot. I just want to wish everybody a very happy holiday and a very, very great new year, and look forward to being back in 2025.
Yeah, we will stay tuned. We'll have you back in soon, Mark. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Grady.